That. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the week 6 design workshop, VGDC UCI design workshop. We're gonna start talk about designing multiplayer games. We're gonna get a general overview of multiplayer games. We're gonna look at like some questions as to what type of games we want to make, and what multiplayer formats would work for that type of design goal. My name's Luke. I'm going to try to lead us. Why make multiplayer games? In order to give players a very controlled and precise experience, do we make multiplayer games? Do we want to, if you want to give your players a controlled experience, is that a good reason to make a multiplayer game? To give your players a competitive experience of playing against each other, is that a reason we make a multiplayer game? Cooperative experience, that seems like a very good reason for a multiplayer game, or a shell show experience. You guys think of any other experiences that we would want to give people? That would.
I'm trying to think, like, it seems like there's a lot of like encapsulation of like co-op and competitive, but maybe there's like maybe there's like some other like semi-cooperative, semi-competitive
A social
games.
experience kind of thing?
Or well, never mind, you're right on there. But more so, but I remember like more like Mario Party things, where it's like you have certain friends you kind of team up with in Mario Party. It's like, yo, we're really good working together. So
Yeah,
you have clicks and stuff.
I would tend to put that under social experience. Though social experience, I divide it into two things. We'll talk about that in a second when I get to social experience. Yes, Ryan.
You would argue that this falls under both competitive and social, but the experience of deceit.
Mm-hmm. That would be a good one. That could probably fit into a couple of these. Did you guys, I don't know, there was like this big MMORPG that I heard about. It was like a spacefaring one. And at one point this guy was getting ready to, he was getting like moved out of his organization that he was a part of. And so before he did that in the game, it was designed in such a way that you could give someone the power to have control of pretty much everything. And before he got moved out of the organization he was a part of, he happened to have that power, and he took all of their resources and scattered it all over the place, and then abandoned ship. And the thing allowed them, because it was based on like politics between the players, the game allowed him to just completely wreck the organization he was a part of and just go hightail it to a new one.
Is like a guild-based system?
Yeah, it was like a guild-based system. I can't remember where it was, but I heard about it and I was like, that is a cool system, but that's
Like the kind of thing that happens on EVE Online.
yeah.
Sounds like
I can't remember. It was like the biggest faction got completely busted because the guy in charge of it was getting excommunicated, and before he got excommunicated, he just wrecked the faction. So we're gonna use these 4 ones and like one more, which is basically a combination of 2 of the other ones, and we're gonna talk about them and like some aspects that they add to multiplayer games. So a controlled experience. When you're trying to make a controlled experience, you want to keep everything under control, obviously. And so you want to get a good story, or you want the player to experience the game in a very specific way. And then when you add one human into it, it becomes very difficult. And a lot of design, like if you were to go to the design workshops on level design, a lot of the design is getting the player to do what you want them to do in a way that they enjoy it. So you're doing a lot of work to just get the player to do what you want to do. And the moment you add another human into that situation, things get way more complicated. So human adds a ton of randomness. So if you're trying to control the situation, humans aren't. The more humans you add, the harder it is to control. So it tends not to be a very good idea if you want like a very linear or a very controlled experience to add more humans to it. It can be a plus or minus. Tends to be a minus the more control you want. The humans can make the game more exciting, but each player decreases the control of the designer, but they can work. So I was looking at Journey 2012 as an example of a very designed, well-controlled game, a very controlled experience, but it is multiplayer. But the players don't really have very much interaction with each other. Anyone play Journey? Or any other multiplayer games that gave you like a very strong experience where the other people didn't really affect your experience? Yeah, I tend to ignore people in Path of Exile.
Thank you so much for
I don't know if it's, I would say a good experience with other players, but usually like dungeon crawlers or like games where there's like a set path, but like you kind of just like shoot enemies right there. So it's kind of like you are put onto a path, but you're working together to like complete every section.
Yeah.
I guess another one would be like RuneScape, huge one where it's like, some of them were like, I really like heavy sociability, or we're doing mining, or doing menial tasks. But the instance I go out into the wilderness, I am instantly terrified of whoever I meet, because there's PvP in that area only, and there's like good loot drops, and I'm like, fuck, I don't want to talk to anyone. If anyone's nearby, just swing.
I wouldn't put that under a controlled experience, because I would put that more under a social experience.
Right.
But controlled experience is more of you want them to have this very specific experience. Because if you go out into the PvP place and they want you to fight people, but no one wants to fight, because sometimes people don't want to fight, then you're not going to fight anyone. But if they put you into the PvP place and they don't want anyone to fight, well, people are probably going to fight. So it's really hard to keep control and get the experience recurring over and over.
Would like games that have like set objectives at every section count towards a controlled experience?
Yes, tend to. No, not really. I would just say controlled experience is more so every time you play the game, even though there are slight differences, you're playing the game in a similar manner and there aren't drastic changes to how the game is played. So like, what are they called? The Telltale games, I would say those are fairly controlled experiences. Because even though you can make choices and you can go through it, no, you're the only one who's affecting the story. There isn't other stuff that is affecting the story. So, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
But I thought Journey was pretty funny because it gives you this very controlled experience of going towards a mountain, and then it just throws other people in there, and you can't really interact with them. Besides, they can see you, you can see them, but that's really all the interaction. So it doesn't affect the control over the experience because basically you have no power. And so in multiplayer games, you've got like three major things fighting with each other. You've got the designer's power, the rules of the world's power, and the player's power. And this one, the player has very little power, and the world and the designer have a ton of power. I might talk about that again, but I'm just coming up with it, so I don't really know everything. Yes?
Why did Journey make it with other players that you can like come into your games but not actually interact with it, may I ask?
I don't know for certain why. It does. People tend to like the sales pitch of, oh, it's multiplayer. I do know that wandering out in the middle of nowhere and then seeing someone that's an actual person is a very satisfying experience. Of I'm on this quest, I'm going towards this thing. Is this a worthy journey that I'm taking? I see someone else taking the same journey. Oh, this might actually be a worthy journey that I'm taking. It gives that kind of experience, but it's also just fun to see other people. But it doesn't really affect the gameplay too much.
There's like an interesting like gray area where it's like the cost of like connecting people together for something so small might not be seen as worth it. But I have seen like some players who kind of like the world building that it brings with like having other players there that are not just like AI, but like they act like players who are playing the game as well. So maybe it's just like maybe it also kind of goes into like a little bit of social area. Now, like you don't get to chat with them explicitly, but you're also like, this is not just an AI, this is an actual person. That's pretty cool.
And none of these experiences are mutually exclusive. So you can grab a couple of these experiences and make a game out of it. I'm just taking an experience and what aspects of multiplayer tend to go well with that experience. And a couple things about it. But yeah, you can have a controlled experience with a lot of people. It's just a lot more work to get a controlled experience with a lot more people, or the people have less power than normal, and so they can't really influence things. Because you don't, if you want to have a controlled experience, you don't want someone else's actions influencing the other person's thing, because then your control over the second person's world is changed. Competitive experience. This one's very classic. It's 1v1 all the way to battle royales. Basically, I'm saying competitive experience is every man for himself. Players are pitted against each other in a fair state. This one requires strong, immutable rules that everyone kind of can understand fairly easily. You don't want one person to have knowledge of rules that just give them a ridiculous advantage. You want everyone on stable playing field so that they can actually battle it out and see who's actually got the most skill and actually compete against each other. Each player should have an equal chance of victory under the rules of the game. The randomness the other player provides can provide a ton of variability. So even like Duncan and Rami's game from last quarter, which was the bounce ball. What was that called? Duncan? Ballistic? Even ballistic? You have the exact same rules, and you have like 2 actions you can take, but still you can get a ton of variability just from running into each other and not knowing what the other person's going to do. So it can be fairly simple. Try to make sure each player has access to attacks and counters so that Yomi can form, or basically inciting actions and reactions. So if you want them to have that randomness and you want that a little bit of thinking about it and planning ahead, if someone can perform an action and there's no response to that action, and when he performs the action he wins, then that's not very fun. But if he can perform the action and you have this counter to that action that you can perform, then you can go back and forth. So I have like Mario Kart and Street Fighter 5. You guys got any questions about this one, competitive? Can you think of any competitive experiences? Yes.
What is Yomi?
Oh, that needs to be defined. Yomi is, I can't remember. You have.
Yomi is like it's the competitive nature of trying to get ahead of your opponent before they can be ahead of you.
Yeah.
I believe the example was like, if you attack, then the other person thinks that you're going to attack, so you block, but then the other person thinks you're going to block, so you do.
So they grab.
And it's like you just keep going back and forth between like psychology.
Yeah.
Not doing anything.
Both of them just stand still for like a good 10 minutes. It's like, I know you're gonna act, so you're gonna do this, so you're gonna.
It's like running a bunch of algorithms in your head and figure out what you're going to do next.
It's like what neutral is for Smash Brothers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. There's like some triangle in there.
Can you guys think of any fairly purely competitive games? So like, yeah.
RTSs, like StarCraft, like StarCraft 2.
Yeah, RTSs.
Those are like purely like, most games are one-on-one, so it's purely based on the players. Like
Those are funny because players pitted against each other in a fair state is one of the things that I was talking about. But RTSs, even though they're pitted against each other in a fair state, they're playing with different rules for the most part. So like how you go about making up your army that you go send at another person to destroy. Thinking specifically of StarCraft, everyone has different rules in that thing, and so even though it's fair with the rules. Whereas like I don't know, other RTSs in most games, they have to put each other on a fair state. So it is possible to put people on the sloped state where it's different things are more viable for the different people and it still be fair, but that's hard to do. Yes, Henry?
Oh, could things like MOBAs, do they count as a competitive experience even though, because they're not really pitted each other in a fair state, because every champion has their own unique mechanics in a sense.
I've got another slide where I'm going to talk about MOBAs, which
Okay.
is going to go right in there. And yes, but like, yeah, it is a competitive. I was putting MOBAs out. Next slide, we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna ask you if there was a word or phrase that you could use to talk about what happens when you have a competitive game that is hypothetically fair, but the players actually aren't at parity and they have different sets of tools and different rules at their disposal.
Asynchronously fair. Was normally what I'm thinking.
You're very close.
What is it?
Asymmetric.
Asymmetric, yeah, asymmetric gameplay. Those tend to be, I like playing asymmetric games because I like dealing with different things, but I don't know. Any other ideas? What was your name?
My name's Kai.
Kai. You have any examples? Or sort of games? No. Okay. Cooperative experience. Players work together for a single goal. Each player should have an equal effect on the outcome of the game. They should be able to, if one player, no matter what they do, isn't going to be able to help you win, and the other player is going to have everything that one player does has to be that one player is the only one who has any effect on the outcome of the game, then that's not really fun for the player who's having no outcome on the game. Players may have complementary but different abilities. There's a lot of games where you're trapped on two sides of a wall. I can't remember what it was, and you have to help each other climb together. And so you don't have to have this thing. It can be asynchronous, just like competitive games. But when it's asynchronous, all players should have an achievable goal that they're working towards at any time. So you shouldn't have a bunch of downtime. So you shouldn't have your players sitting around not really doing much and then waiting for the other player to complete their goal. So usually this can be done with goals that are accomplished at very similar times, or a list of goals that you can go on to the next thing instead of waiting for your other player, or an action that can be used to help the other player complete their goal. Can be fairly easily added into single player games. That I was surprised to see is that a lot of single player games that I would define as predominantly single player can very easily become a cooperative game. Like I was trying to find a pure cooperative game, but all three of my examples here at the bottom are in fact single player games that can be made cooperative, or cooperative games that can be made single player. Yes?
Have you ever seen games like Lovers in a Space Time or Overcooked? Or actually, Overcooked I think is single player, right?
So
Does it have
I
some-
wanted to throw Brothers on here.
Yes, Brothers. That's another
Brothers, it was one, but I couldn't find any good pictures of it.
Those games I think you can only play if you have more than one person.
Technically, you can play. Brothers happens on one remote.
Oh.
And so technically, you can play through the whole thing on one remote. You're just controlling two people. But you can do two-player, one remote. It's kind of weird. I tried to play that with my brother. We got about like 30 minutes into it, and then I moved, and so we haven't finished it. So, but it was pretty fun. It was a weird game. Yes.
So if you have a cooperative game
Mhm.
that you want to turn single player, what could you do? Because not everyone might have a friend.
Yeah. So if you have a cooperative game, you gotta see if it's an asymmetrically cooperative game, it's not going to work. Or you can just cut out half the puzzles. So in a asymmetrically cooperative game, if your actions aren't affecting each other, then the other person isn't even necessary. But if you have to perform a puzzle which helps them perform a puzzle which helps you perform a puzzle, then there's no real way to split that up. Whereas single player games that were made cooperative can be fairly easily brought back to single player games. But how would you go about taking a cooperative game and making it single player is you could take the puzzle that the other person was supposed to be doing and have that kind of run automatically. And you would just get one side of the puzzle, and you would be able, or you could just have it where the single player could swap back between the two things that they're controlling.
Because the reason I ask is because I know some games they bring like an AI
Yeah.
that acts as a second player in case you do not have a friend with
Yeah.
you at the time. Sometimes I can cause issues though, since like if the game is supposed to bring a social experience, but you make like an AI that's like not good, then you might just not want to use it. But if the AI is too good and like acts better than a human, then you
Yeah.
might just opt to play single player instead of getting a second person. So it's kind of a weird balancing act from what I see.
I haven't seen too many of those games that work very well. Intentionally cooperative games that work very well single player. Yes.
Would Snipper Clips be a good example of that? Where it has like a bot, where like whenever you have the one remote kind of thing.
Snipper Clips is that Switch game, right?
Yeah.
It's just
I
that.
haven't played that game.
I didn't know there was a bot.
From what I remember, I know there's like you can do
I
the
would,
single player.
I would be surprised, but I was surprised.
So the examples I show are Castle Crushers, which is a multiplayer game, which is predominantly supposed to be a social experience where you get 3 of your friends and you play it, but it can be played completely all the way through single player. What is that one? And then I also have Halo, which I remember playing Halo with my brother at some point. That was a ton of fun. And then Dark Souls, which is predominantly a single player game to the point where you can't even do cooperation in the newest iteration of Dark Souls, Sekiro, but you just see little signs around on the ground, you go up to them, click them, and then you now have 2 players in your game. You guys think of any cooperative experiences? Cooperative games?
Arkham Horror, the card game. Pandemic.
Oh yeah, pandemic. Oh, that actually brings up an interesting issue. What about quarterbacking?
Please define that for those who don't know what it is.
So quarterbacking is when you're in a cooperative environment, but one person starts like taking over the entire game and like telling other players what to do. Pandemic is very big on that, and they try to prevent it, but sometimes it just doesn't work. So I'm just curious about like if there's a slide about like quarterbacking and cooperative games.
There is not.
Okay. So I'm just wondering how would you say, would you address the issue of quarterbacking in your games, or would you just like kind of
So,
leave it?
if I would try to make sure that every single person who's playing the game has, first of all, an equal amount of effect on the outcome. And so that would make it less obvious, depending on which role you are, how much authority you should have. So if like one person is constantly not having to worry about themselves, then that gives them more time to worry about other people. So if the person who's quarterbacking has a puzzle that he has to solve and he's worrying about that puzzle, that doesn't give him very much time to look at what the other person's doing and help and tell them what to do. So if you keep them occupied, that would be probably my best suggestion, is keeping everyone occupied. If everyone's dealing with their own thing, but you do want them to be able to talk to each other and give suggestions on like how to do things. So it's a tightrope between those two, because you want that to be cooperative. You want them to have conversation. You want them to help each other. You want them to feel like they're helping each other. And some people, when they're helping each other, they try to take control. And so one way you can do them is give them enough stuff to do that even though they can talk to each other about what the other person's doing, they can ask for help, that they have something to do and they're not just waiting on the next person. Because if you're waiting, quarterbacking or commanding tends to be all you have left. So you're playing backseat, playing the game for the other person. And so just giving them stuff to do is probably, or giving them not just stuff to do, but actual gameplay is probably the best to prevent quarterbacking. But I haven't thought about that too much. Team cooperative experience. 2 of our teams pitted against each other. This is where I would throw MOBAs. Oh, wrong one, sorry. Team cooperative experience. 2 or more teams pitted against each other for a single goal. This is where I throw most MOBAs. This gives you a lot more options on the individual person's abilities. So you can have one person in your team to have ridiculously specific abilities, as long as the teams as a whole tend to be fairly balanced. So like, I can't remember what it's called. We probably have a poster in here for it. What's the new Blizzard
Overwatch?
game? Overwatch. Overwatch tends to do that. We don't have a poster. Oh, there it is.
That's it, right?
The name's covered though.
Yeah,
Overwatch, we do have, they tend to have very specific person abilities, like a healer and a tank and stuff like that, generalized. And so like, you just have to know how your person interacts with, generalizing it makes it where you just have to know how your person interacts with that subtype, and then you also have to know how your person interacts with other people of within that type. Most of the problems and benefits of the previous 2, cooperative and competitive, tend to apply here. Teams should probably be given some way to strategize. They should probably mics or a chat. It's probably the best especially if you're not on the couch. Can you guys think of any cooperative experiences or any other aspects of cooperative play or team cooperative play? Like, I had this question earlier and now I can't remember it.
About MOBAs?
It was about MOBAs. It was, so if you've got, I can't remember the question. Never mind. Do you guys think of any other team competitive experiences?
I mean, Battle Royale's kind of in this category, right?
Mm-hmm.
To some extent.
Or team battle royale, so
Yeah.
it's possible to play the battle royale where it's every man for himself, and I would say that's pure competitive. But a battle royale where you go in as a team of 2 or a team of 5, that's team competitive, where you got a little team.
Why wouldn't you make truces during like solo competitive play?
That is something that so like, I know that in Battlegrounds, PUBG, what they would do is that it was a bannable offense of making truce.
Really?
Truce with a person.
That's
And,
bannable?
you could say, hey, I don't want to fight, and then run off, but you couldn't form a team
Wow.
In a solo run.
in the solo runs.
Oh, because like solo
Yeah.
people can only play with other solo
Yeah.
people. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because then it's kind of like you're building a team during
Yeah,
the game.
and then you're getting an advantage.
You're getting an advantage over the others.
Mm-hmm.
Usually in games like PUBG, that's not something you really have to worry about too much due to the tendency of everyone in those games to shoot first and ask questions later. But it was a bannable expense. It was something that they were dealing with.
That seems like a very extreme way to go about it if you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense that it does give you an advantage. It does sound very harsh though.
Yeah, I don't, bannable might not be the right word. It was definitely an offense that they're looking out for, and they're like, hey, you shouldn't do
It's
it.
interesting because like I know even like it's funny because like those games are based off of like the movies like Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Like the old Battle Royale like story.
Yes,
And I think even in those stories, the whole point was that you would team up with people in the beginning so that you could have a higher chance of survival.
Yeah, and
then
it
you fight
does.
against each other.
That would completely change the experience. It's not you just fighting on your own. It's you
Yeah.
trying to form a team.
And
And then
later
as
on
you get like closer to victory,
you worry
You
about
you
the-
betray
begin
all
to have to worry
section.
about where's the betrayal going to come from.
Yeah.
Which is something I kind of wish they were able to have in those type of games.
Yeah.
But
There's
I
not
feel
enough.
like it would be-
There's not enough good voice communication, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Like,
Interesting. It'd be really interesting.
Also, it keeps people from being able to figure out what servers to go on in order to play together, and then actually having a team, and then just messing with their because they have leaderboards, and so
Oh.
they don't want the leaderboards to be skewed because then people get irritated.
I see. That is interesting when you bring like stakes into like these type of games.
Yeah.
Team cooperation tends to have weird dynamics. I'm sure I don't know, you probably have a slide on toxicity, but
Yeah.
that also probably comes up in these type of games.
Toxicity comes up a lot in like all social experiences. I don't have a slide for it specifically, but it's something you have to watch out in most things, in most multiplayer games, especially online multiplayer games. Any multiplayer game where the connection is over a network, toxicity becomes one of the main things you have to watch out for, and so that's not really the design of the game. That's like the design of the structure around the game. You have to just implement all sorts of stuff, especially in like the bigger
Systems and everything.
social experience games where you're trying to get a social experience. Yes.
Oh no, I was just
Oh.
waiting.
And the bigger social experience where the point of the game is for people to interact with each other, then in those games you need a lot of structure in order to prevent people from ruining another person's experience. Or you can just throw people at the wall. Like some games, even though they'll watch the chat, games like Rust and like the precursors to the PUBG games, where basically they just throw 100 people in the server, or like what is the name of that game? H1Z1. What's the one with the dinosaurs?
Oh,
Ark Survival Evolved. Basically, they just take a bunch of people, throw them into a server with a bunch of preset rules, and then you're free to do whatever you want within those rules, except for sometimes they're buggy, in which case you're free to do whatever outside those rules when you get a bug, but usually you're not buggy.
Rust is very fun.
Yeah, a lot of people really enjoy those, but you can then take that hard to Google clip of a bunch of people just being super irritated and super angry while they play the game.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic how social experience was bring people together, but
Yeah.
just due to the anonymity of the internet and like the fact that you can set rules that can be broken is just very hard.
Yes.
There's actually some really interesting thought, and there's a very good GDC talk on this, about how game mechanics influence social communities around a game, and how you can design games with mechanics in mind to create particular social experiences. Right? Like one of the things that people have been thinking about is this idea that players are more interested in being kind to people they know they have to deal with again. If you know that you are going to have to interact with another person in your future, you now have a reason to be kind to this person. If you have reasonable suspicion that you'll never see them again, you're more likely to be mean to them.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Right? So like one of the interesting things they talked about in this GDC talk is maybe the idea of, instead of just having here's my big pool of players, take your players and make little villages, just randomly, and say, this is your village. These are the 20 players you get to play against. You have to be nice with them, because every time you log in to play this game, you're going to be playing the game with these 20 players in your village.
Yeah.
That'd be very interesting because, player retention then really is different in that sense. Is like how player retention is.
Yeah.
That'd be really fascinating. Like you see them multiple times over and over.
But yes, it's a very good GDC talk. They talk about a lot of interesting ideas of how like players, the kinds of things that motivate players to work together, how you players want to interact with other humans, when they are motivated to be kind and when they aren't.
How does that deal with players who want to play with other players that they know previously? Do they just invite them into their village, or?
Oh God, how did they talk about this? So you're dealing with the ideas that, well, if you want players to meet people, people are more likely to meet new people if they don't already have people they already know.
Yeah.
But then, I don't actually know how they talked about that, what the conclusions they came to.
Yeah.
They do talk about it, I remember that, but it's been a while since I actually.
What games actually implement that?
Hmm?
What games actually implement that?
Super niche indie ones.
Okay.
But it is interesting, right? And like one of the things that one of my big conclusions that I've drawn about League is that a big problem with League is that you're motivated to be mean to people because other people through no fault of their own, are able to give you bad gameplay experiences.
Yeah.
Right? So like people tend to bully other people for being mean, in part because if someone is of no fault of their own unskilled at that game, their simple state of existence is going to cause other people to have negative gameplay experiences because of how the mechanics work.
Yeah.
Right? If the quality of your gameplay experience was independent of the skill of the other people on your team, or cough's independent of the skill of everyone because you shouldn't have to have skills to play games, you should just get to have fun, period.
Yeah.
Then you probably wouldn't have that level of toxicity because there's no motivation to. Everyone gets to have fun. No one cares. They're all having fun.
Like, that's one thing, like, but you also want every person to feel like they're adding to the victory. You don't want to, if you're just playing the game and you're like, yes, you're at the right skill, but you're not supporting people, then that starts to run into a problem. So like games like, you guys ever played the Lego series?
Mm-hmm.
Those tend to be really fun games. They're not that hard, but I play it, my little brother who's like 3 plays it, we play it together, and we're both having a very similar experience of enjoying the game. And I destroy 5 people, but he, in the same amount of time, still gets to destroy the 3 other Lego dudes. And so even though he's not adding quite as much to the victory state, he is still adding to the victory state, and he still gets a similar gameplay experience in the same amount of time. So putting large swaths of enemies that are fairly easy to destroy but are fun to destroy is a nice way to do it, because then now everyone is dealing with, we all have these problems that we gotta deal with, and whether you deal with 3 problems or you deal with 7 problems, together we still dealt with all 7 problems. And so everyone got to face as much challenge as they needed to interact with. And so I thought that was a pretty cool thing about the Lego games. Though I don't really hear them being declared as great design games. Anyone ever says that, but I think they're very fun and enjoyable and well designed.
I like the Lego games. I haven't played one recently enough to look at it and be like, is this actually that well designed? But
wasn't there the Lego Creativerse where you like make all your levels?
I've never played that one.
That was an interesting one I've heard. But is that due to because though of the simplicity of the mechanics though?
Yeah.
Then more so, because the problem about League is that it requires you to know so much pre-built knowledge. I feel
Except
like.
it actually doesn't. League
What?
has a really, really good curve of learning, right? Like at every step of development in League, you always have a complete conception of how the game works that allows you to play the entire game, and there is always something more for you to learn, and you learn things one at a time as they come naturally to you, right? The game is set up in a way that you really gradually, like you start the game and you're walking around and you're basic attacking. And that's a complete toolkit, that's all you need, you're playing, right? You really can engage with the game and move in and move out and target different things and have the complete strategic experience, which is that basic toolkit. And then it adds on your toolkit. Then it gives you, well, here are some submarine abilities. And it adds on that toolkit, well, here are some character abilities. Well, then it adds on to that again, here's another character ability, right? And these are just happening at regimented steps as you go through the game process, just adding one thing at a time, as you learn about the game and as you master things you already understand. So like, here's a new thing to learn and master, right? And you never need everything to play the game. At every step, no matter what subset of these tools you have enough things that you can really, right? If you take out everything beyond it, you still have a complete game, you have a complete play experience. Yes, you do get rewarded for having more understanding because, yeah, that's the point. Why else you want players to get that learning experience? That learning experience is fun, and so you need to motivate them somehow to go down that learning track. But from a new player's perspective, that new player does not need the information beyond them. The only reason that there could possibly be a perception that that new player needs an information beyond them is because that there's a perception that that new player is somehow not good enough, right? Which is a problem because the new player, you shouldn't need to be good enough to play a game. You should just play the game. It's fucking play. It's in the term. Right? And so, right, I think therein lies the problem is, right, players aren't allowed to just play, right? Because the system is set up in such this way that everyone has to, if anyone isn't as good as you, your experience is worse because they merely breathed.
Yeah, it's very.
And that's a really problematic place to be because it does not take a very rational human to get mad at that person because their mere existence is demonstrably, measurably making your time worse. But there's no good reason to it because they're having a good experience, right? The game is built for them to have a good experience. They don't need all this extra skill to have a good experience. In theory,
That's
if
why
the game didn't decide that because they're less skilled, you all deserve to be miserable.
You know what I don't like about, there's a huge frustration of the idea of like, I should, let's continue this, I'll continue with you later, because
we can keep the conversation going.
are you
about
sure?
whether-
I would
yeah.
rather let you finish your workshop.
We're about to go into
You
like
decide what is a reasonable tangent and what.
conversation. I think is always a good thing to have.
Okay then, alright. It's more so, I don't like how in the matchmaking system of League of Legends, they start you off and you can't get the other Summer skills. Like, I can't jungle in League of Legends until I reach level, until I get Smite. And you can only get Smite until you get to level 9. I mean, you have to play 9 games where sometimes there is no jungler in the first beginning of the thing, where they don't essentially show you anything of that. Like, there's no, like, they don't give you that information. It's a huge, like, part of, like, how, like, the system of the game works when you start, like, and, sorry.
But you don't need it, right? The idea is that if you're looking at this from this angle of, I know there's this thing called jungler, I know it adds so much to the game, why the fuck don't I have this? What you need, the angle that you really, especially as a designer, you want to be coming at this as, is, I'm a new player. The game says, there's a thing called jungler. It's like, cool, there's the jungler, and there's the summon, and there's a shungler, and there's the what the fuck, I have 5 of these things to learn, right? It doesn't want to give you that. It wants to say, no. There are the tanky dudes, and there are the shooty dudes. That's it. There are 3 lanes. What are they? What's the difference? Don't worry about it. There's the tanky dudes, and there's the shooty dudes. Go tank and shoot, right? And then you get that concept, and you master it. Then it starts throwing new things at you. Because if you just throw everything at the brick wall, that's going to be confusing. The player's not going to be able to keep track of that. They're going to have a lot to manage. The game is very deliberately parceling out information so that you can understand things one at a time, right? And that's not a problem because League of Legends with tanky dudes and shooty dudes, sure, it's not as complicated or interesting as a game with junglers, but it is still under objective measurement, or objective measurement, a well-designed, interesting game. It's just going to get more well-designed later, but it's fine then, and that's the better thing on the learning curve. That's why it works that way.
But one thing, like, you gotta, when you're designing a game, is how much time do you have to design the game? How much money do you have to design the game? And if it's already out, you start running into the problem of how much can we design? Because if currently League of Legends is already out, and it already makes a ton of money. So as designers, they don't really want to, the designers who are dealing with it don't really want to change the game very much because it's successful. It makes them money, and people play it and people have fun. People also play it and have not much fun. People play it and hate it. So that's why what they're doing, it's kind of funny whenever you like go to like in 61, I think, or 60, ICS 60, I had a person from Riot Games come in and talk about League of Legends and talk about how they were dealing with the toxicity in League of Legends. And it was not, most of the talks on the toxicity in League of Legends that I've noticed, they are trying to take a Band-Aid and put it on the wound. They aren't trying to make a structurally sound game because they already put the game out. And the game already exists, so it's now really hard to go back and like alter the design because where they fairly obviously got it wrong. It's very hard to change the design now that it's already out, now that people are already playing it. And so basically now they're just throwing Band-Aids at it.
The problem is that they took away some of the things that would have improved the social experience. We used to have a tribunal system.
Tribunal? Like the guild
Players
system?
got to like help the Riot team like help ban and unban people from the game. Like if the players had a tribunal system, and they had a ranking system too, based on how many things you got correct. And basically, you could go in, see a report, like from 3 of their games that they got reported, look at the chat logs, look at what champs they were playing, what their KDA was, and what summoner skills they had. And then after like 1 minute, because they need to give you 1 minute to read everything, then you can decide whether to ban or not ban the person.
Wow.
They had that system, but they took it away, season 3.
The problem with that system that I either heard them talking about or I noticed myself, I can't remember which, probably heard them talking about, was that it didn't work as well as they wanted it to, in such a manner that like I can't remember what he said. He talked about that system and they removed it because the people were getting very elitist about who can be the banners and who can be banned, and so the people
Everyone had access to it.
Yeah.
So I don't know why that's an excuse.
And
Okay.
so
Because we have this preconception that your bad is somehow your fault. So even now you look at someone, they have a shitty KDA, they're actually a good person who wanted to work with their team, but they still get banned because somehow it's their fault and they deserve to be punished for simply not having played as many hours of video games as you.
Yeah, it does happen.
I see.
It's like you're not playing as much as us, but I guess you have to get out of here now.
Which is
Segregation.
heinous. If someone has 1 hour per week to play video games, they deserve to play video games as much as anyone else.
Exactly. I do agree with that. Oh, how do you guys feel about Smurf culture then?
I don't know what Smurf is.
Smurfing is where essentially an more experienced player makes a new account to either like the intention to either restart like their kind of game from the ground up or to play with a friend that they have. A lot of people. What?
Lower level.
Yeah, lower level friends especially. So like a great example is in League of Legends where if you're like a diamond player or
Yeah.
masters player and you want to play someone who's like gold or bronze, so you would like make a new account and starting from like essentially level 1.
Yeah.
And you're essentially a master player playing with the rest of the people who don't have junglers, who don't have everything else. And you're essentially giving that essentially where that master player is then like ruining the experience for everyone. Because he's so high leveled that everyone else is not having fun because he's so ahead.
In a well-designed game, that shouldn't be possible. In a well-designed game, you should have 0 motivation for being a Smurf. A master tier player and a day 1 player should be able to play the game and both have good experiences. No need for a Smurf account in a well-designed game.
Funny you bring that up. My friend told me that they recently had a system that you can pick a role to play ranked. So you,
Oh,
have
they got rid of
you
that.
have different. Oh, they had.
I just got rid of that in like
Wow.
a couple months because they straight up people would either like straight up like make it say I'm mid, but then realize like they would choose as mid to say, hey, I'm a really good bot, so give me bot. Like the whole system of that, literally everyone hated it. Like from the get go, just like get it out of there, and that was the
Never mind. It doesn't work because players.
It was the idea of
Players found a way to
then
play
because there's no rank, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and then you
So it's like if I'm a silver mid but I'm a diamond support, just pick mid and then swap with the support.
And then what's the worst though is like, cause then people who got autofilled really did not care when they got autofilled, because there was straight up no incentive at all to play that lane. So they would just either just straight up feed, like inherently for no reason. Because they get no incentive to play because it was not in their ranking system. So they just had no incentive. So
Oh,
that's
I
why,
see.
Yeah.
Because if you're a silver top but a diamond support and you don't get support, you can either try to get that role or just say fuck it.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no incentive to like, get back and get like top. Like, what's the point?
I had a very strange experience with League of Legends compared to like everyone else, because I played League of Legends like maybe like 12 hours at most.
Exactly.
Not very much time in it. And my first game, I played on a team. Didn't really know what I was doing. Just did what I was doing. Did whatever damage. We lost. I had fun. We lost. And then I was like, hey, I'm kind of new at this. And then someone from the other team was like, hey, okay, come friend request. We're gonna play a couple matches together. And then I was on the same team as someone from the other team, and we played like 4 matches together, and we won 2 and lost 2. And that was my first experience with League of Legends, and that was a very positive experience. That was a very cool experience of meeting this person who I was playing against, and that person coming and saying, okay, let me show you kind of the ropes of how this game is kind of played. And think League of Legends definitely gives people room to do that, but it doesn't encourage it in a nice way. Because you want the people with more experience to be able to talk to the people with less experience and say, hey, come on, let me show you how to play the game. That's a very nice experience. That when you have multiple people, when you have different points of the learning curve, you want the people at the higher points to bring up the people on the lower points of the learning curve. Yes.
I did hear about this system in 168 where there was an old MMO where there was a mentor and squire system.
Mhm.
So a mentor would like want to take on squires, and then the squires would want to pair up with masters or mentors. And the system is that the mentor would get all the experience and like stuff from the squires that they all had because you have multiple of them. But the squires can use that position of power because essentially they're more powerful than the mentor in this relationship because they offer themselves to them. So it's like, hey, what are you gonna give me if I'm your squire? Oh, I can give you this stuff. And then so like there was that social experience where like two players kind of like had a mutual relationship, and then that person can also have squires, and then so the mentor will always make sure that they have like a network of squires to help them like essentially autoplay the game, but make sure
Competing system going.
yeah, basically.
That's a
And
cool way
so
to-
I
it
like
it
that.
would be a good way to like make sure that the
There
more
are
experienced
ways
players
to
talk to
use
like
it.
level. Well, sure, but this system most likely was a PvE game, so it's probably like you have your mentor and then he wants to help out like a lower level person, and at the same time they'll be getting something out of helping that lower level person.
I would like the idea of, cause I agree with you, Luke. Like when I started playing League of Legends, I played the first game. I was like 10. I had it on my laptop and I was sitting there, didn't know how to play, didn't even know how to like work everything. And I just lose games and I was like, oh whatever. Then when I kind of got really serious into it, I just got a friend with me, kind of apprenticed me, kind of said, so, oh, look at the build, or look at the things, and trying to dig those out. A lot of it was through trial and error, and a lot of it was just like when I did the stuff, friends would say, oh, kind of leash, and it's like when you're playing bot lane or top lane, you kind of learn the things as you go along, and they learn by people telling you, and kind of by the culture around the game, and you kind of learn things that way, which is really interesting in a social experience because it's not like even new players and old players are helping each other in that sense, so that's really cool. But it's the idea of like there's like no incentive and stuff like that unless you say like you're new, people are inherently gonna flame you like because they don't unless you say that you're new with this camp or say you're new with this thing because they instantly just have a bad experience with you. Like they'll instantly have like negative opinions about you from the get-go.
I would like to see more of like the system Ryan talked about, where like he put people with each other for longer periods of time to see if that gets rid of toxicity.
Yeah, I would agree, but then the problem is that people just like, oh, I keep a new account or something like that, unless it's like IP tracked.
I mean,
I have some solutions to this. Forget how it. I think you could just leave
leave a village.
Hey, is it that you could leave a village whenever you want, but then every time you do, you restart, you lose all your progress, so your progress is tied to a village?
That makes sense.
That's actually fine.
What happens when a village gets super small? Does it just, I think I saw this GDC.
Yeah.
Does it just get absorbed into like another village?
That would make the most sense.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
It would force them to
or do
meet
they
other
realize
new
that the two
and
people
it
left in the
would
village
reduce the
that
size
pushed
of the
everyone
server.
away might have a
yeah,
problem?
and then they're two high level server thingies, and then they both feel both elitist. They like you can't leave though, because if they leave, they lose progress. So like just forcing them to play against each other. It's like, go two toxic people, make up. One of you come out alive. Either both of you, one of you will leave, or both of you will not be toxic anymore.
We have 5 minutes left, so if you want to wrap up.
Yeah, I think this is pretty much my last thing. I'm gonna ask if you guys have any questions. Yes.
How do you feel about Mario Party and Monopoly?
I would put Mario Party under here. I would put Monopoly as a terrible game.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
I have a ton of fun playing Monopoly,
Exactly.
but
Game
my
design-wise.
family also cheats a ton, and so
The house rules.
yeah.
Hey, can I get you get immunity for 4 of my spots and we go through? That's the fun part about Monopoly though, like the social deception things.
Over spring break, I went back to my family, and we played a ton of Monopoly, and it was a very very emotional 2 to 3 hours
Oh.
of just sitting in there with like 5 of my siblings and my dad, and the tension got really high really quick and people were very angry, which is definitely an emotional state. And it's definitely the emotional state that the person who designed Monopoly wanted you to have, because they wanted you to realize how much Monopoly sucked, which is they succeeded absolutely in getting you the experience they wanted you to have.
Really? I just from first Dr. Steinkulter talked about like how monopolies were really fun when you owned them though.
Yeah, but
Right.
the person who designed Monopoly didn't want the outgoing experience to be, oh, Monopolies are cool. They wanted the outgoing experience to be, oh, this is why Monopoly sucked, because they just control everything. Yes.
Yeah, I saw a video on this. It was basically like, why is Monopoly like such a, I guess, competitive game? It was the title, and it's basically like it's not the person themselves who's evil, but the rules of the game force you to role play as someone who's evil. Because you could take like your child, but based on the rules of the game, your child will be like, oh, you landed on my boardwalk with 1 hotel on it. You have to give me all your mortgage. And it's like they're not evil in real life, but like they're evil in the game because the rules make them evil. That's how you win the game.
No. That's a move.
So, Monopoly is a strange one. It definitely gives you an emotional experience, which is, I prefer games that give me bad emotional experiences to, or not bad, but negative emotional experiences of anger and frustration to games that give me no emotional experience.
It's
So-
better to have an emotional experience than none at all.
Yeah, so like I don't even remember the games that give me no emotional experience because they were so ever so slightly impactful. But Monopoly, I remember that game. I remember having fun playing that game. I remember having a terrible time playing that game. It tends to get boring for most people fairly quickly. Especially since there's no, so like I play Eternal a ton, Ryan plays Eternal a ton, and at the upper right hand corner of the screen in every single game you have the ability to quit the game. And people do that all the time. If they don't get the right cards, Eternal doesn't force you to continue playing in a losing situation. When we play Monopoly, there's a force getting us to play the game even when we're in a losing condition.
Well, you can bankrupt at any time you want. It's just you'll be giving the winner like a heavy advantage.
Yeah. And so like, you're not allowed to just check out and start getting on your phone because that's disrespectful to everyone else who's playing the game. But it also really sucks to be playing as you right now because
It's like just have nothing to do.
I've already
You
lost.
lost
I
all
lost.
your agency.
I lost the
You
game.
can't do any offense.
I'm gonna stop recording.
Okay.
But we can keep on talking.
But yeah.
If you guys
One
want
last
to.
thing. How do you feel about like shadow bans or toxicity to handle toxicity?
Shadow bans where you don't know you've been banned? What?
We can turn off the recording for that. But basically, I heard of this thing that used to be on like old Reddit. I don't know if they do it anymore. Where like some